The first speaker is Luis LOPEZLLERA. Unfortunately, he could not join us today for this session, and therefore I am going to read, first of all, his resume, and then a text that he prepared for this meeting. He's a co-founder of the Mexican Institute of Social Studies, 1960, and of the Authentic Trade Union Front, 1961. He was the co-founder of the Housing and Settlement Operational Center in 1962, and co-founder of Promotion of Popular Development 5 years later. In 1967, he visited the indigenous experiences promoted by the Diocese of San Cristóbal de las Casas, Chiapas. He identified with the indigenous cause and connected with instances of libertarian struggle in Central America. 1968, he co-directed the Mexican Social Secretariat, and in 1974, he promoted the Regional Committee of Emergency and Solidarity, an articulation of peoples of Central America and the Caribbean. He participated in the International Society for Development, and he was the president of the International Group on Grassroots Initiatives created in Rome. He has participated in the Asian Regional Exchange for New Alternatives and in the People's Plan 21. In 1990, he created the Other Stock Exchange, and in 1994, the Barter Network Clatlog, which issues its own currency. He coordinated the Solidary Economy and Community Money Tents of the World Social Forum from 2008 to 2010. He's part of a group that promotes the ecosystemic dialogues. In 2017, he co-founded Ecomun, a mesoeconomic currency that summarizes 25 years of experience in social currency. He is a founding member of the Global University for Sustainability. So he prepared a text called Chiapas Indigenous Movements, Questions, Reflections, and New Paradigms. Historical notes and reflections regarding the indigenous experience in Chiapas, including the Indigenous Congress on October 1974, where the indigenous emerged as an emerging organic subject, seeking solutions to the systemic violence that is suffered there. It is important to consider that this Congress had a before and a during this conference and an after time. Another event 20 years later captured the worldwide expectation. The Zapatista Army of National Liberation in 1994 has evolved along with new emergencies in Mexico and in the entire world. And up to the current times, these historical events cover a period that ranges over 60 years, since 1960 to 2021. It is therefore necessary to continue understanding the truth and to create new paradigms to positively pursue a fight for justice and peace. It is often said that the truth will make you free. The lie will make you believers. The war in Vietnam in 1968 caused great outrage, which generated a countercultural movement that started in France and which achieved demonstrations against the conventional powers in many countries. In Mexico, the student movement was massacred in October in the main square in the capital of the country, which caused great political upheaval and radicalization of some groups that opted for an armed path. In 1973, there was a coup d'etat in Chile. President Allende was killed, and a wave of solidarity was created, questioning the intervention of the US. The work of the church, led by the bishop of the Diocese of San Cristóbal de las Casas, had covered extensively during the 60s almost the entire Chiapas region, populated by 4 main ethnic groups: Tzetzales, Tzotziles, Choles, and Tojolabales. Don Samuel, the bishop, applied a singular pastoral respectful of the indigenous community, and he summarized the purpose as making not so much the word of God known, but the word of the people of God. Luis, who visited Don Samuel since 1967, was invited to cooperate as a member of the team that promoted the Congress, contributing his social experience full-time during the 60s, learning from Ivan Illich and collaborating with the Mexican Social Secretariat and lay organizations, getting to know the grassroots processes served by international centers, such as, for example, the SAL based in Chile. The Congress was impressive and it got the attention of the president, Echeverría, who tried to multiply this event in the country, but under government control. Independent radical groups, nevertheless, tried to get involved in the subsequent steps to the Congress agreements. This ended in 1977, this public process, but many autonomous initiatives continued working locally or regionally. For example, the Plan Unión de Ejidos, Kiptik La Ta Lekublex. The Christian current driving this Congress assumed the philosophy of non-violence, accepting exceptions in case of murder, genocide, and tyranny, in contrast to other tendencies that were violent and guerrilla-based, based on the experience of Mao Zedong, who triumphed in China, and the other one inspired in the Che Guevara, who triumphed in Cuba. The unique nature of these ethnic groups derived from the Mayas contained an unprecedented character, which was perceived in the Congress of '74, when more than 1,000 indigenous peoples spoke to one another. First, they thought that these came before a large silence, after which there was a single voice in full agreement. The topics addressed were land, commerce, education, health. Latently, they could feel the need for defense faced with racism and military repression that has outraged the identity and security of the indigenous peoples. The Congress was a combination of decentralized work, invisible in the great space of Chiapas, and concentrated work that was visible in the conference room for days. And even there, the Ladinos could not understand what was being created there because there was only simultaneous translation in the languages of the four ethnic groups. Spanish language for foreign guests required deferred translation. For a report of the results of this Congress, you can check the book called Rebellion in Chiapas, a historical anthology written by John Walkmack. In the 70s and 80s, there were three trends of promotion in Chiapas that coincided with certain times and space, but which had differences from one another. First, the church promoted by Bishop Samuel Ruiz, who in 1968 was already openly identified with the liberation theology. And he was present that year in the Episcopal Congress that was held in Medellin, Colombia. And he was accompanied in Chiapas by religious, deacons, and catechists. Second, the Maoist-inspired movement that was created in 1977, identified as the proletarian line, popular power, or mass movement under the leadership of Adolfo Uribe, an economist trained in the UNAP. This group initially was in dialogue with Don Samuel, but later was expelled from the region by the indigenous peoples themselves. The guerrilla group Forces of Liberation that was decimated in Nepanta by the government forces, but which managed to insert itself later on in 1983 among rebellious groups, from which Subcomandante Marcos appeared, who consolidated his bases later on and made possible the existence of the Zapatista army. In January 1994, this Zapatista team attacked and seized 4 towns: San Cristobal, Margarita, Altamirano, and Ocosingo. Mexico and the world were shocked. The civil society mobilized in support. A dialogue started in the cathedral between the EZLN and the government spokesman, with the presence of Bishop Samuel Ruiz. This The indigenous epics in Chiapas is described in different books that have been published. Many authors have talked about it. They are known by academics and the supported public, but also by the intelligence of police and military bodies in Mexico and in the US at the service of both legal and unspeakable powers. Luis learned a lot from the indigenous peoples in Chiapas, as well as other colleagues such as Javier Vargas, SEIB, Juan OJEDA, SANTANA, who will also be here in the seminar today. He had an existential mutation, not only with a greater criticism of the world, but also with a great radical creativity. And this mutation led him to promote the Regional Emergency and Solidarity Committee by the struggling peoples of Central America to connect with the Colombian visionary Germán Zavala and to create the other stock exchange in 1990, in which context the creation of the No Money Multitrueque started in 1994 to reinforce sovereign communities. This initiative led to many other experiences that have arisen in the world to free humanity from the banking and speculative dictatorships that have concentrated the power in 1% of the population, a plutocracy over the remaining 99% of human beings. Finally, some reflections and paradigms that are shared by Luis. Faced with the questions that arrived in Mexico, a diagnosis as close as possible to the truth is important because the truth can depend on the subject who becomes aware of their own reality and the means used to express it amid the diversity of cultures, classes, evolutions, languages, etc. Reality is usually analyzed as binary or dialectically, showing the differences that are at stake. And history shows us that that ends up in determinism, with violence, with great human and environmental tragedies. Let's be aware of the unprecedented potential of humanity, and let's adopt an analectic way, which in Greek means beyond reason. Reason tells us that we live in a world where injustice prevails, caused by individualism that is destroying more than half of humanity. It's destroying the planet Earth that sustains humanity as well. Therefore, we need to release this feeling of loving gratitude to the planet and passion and caring for those who suffer from lacking what they need. Helping the needy must not only be given, but also give himself, sharing the goods that were acquired. This is more than a revolution, it is a devolution, it is giving back to them. Let's refine our vision of the facts, let's acquire a meaning of life, and let's think and feel in an unprecedented way, overcoming what was considered to be so far a normal life. Undoubtedly, climate change is the main challenge nowadays. There is an extermination that many living species face, starting with humans. Certainly, we must all be a new subject for change, very different from the convention of the political parties and economic corporations. We must be ecologists, as well as half of the population will be feminist in the future, and many minorities will become indigenous. We must all learn to be endogenist, that is to say, to start from within, from the bottom, betting on the environment, austerity and redistribution, both in the countryside and in the city, in the farms and in agribusiness, in urban polymorphism, as well as in the megalopolic nomadism, getting rid of the myopia created by all of this. I hope that we can create, led by the enlightened one, a positive virus that creating the spirits and the ethics can multiply itself without any power and without panic, bringing love to everyone. This is the document that Luis LOPEZLLERA sent me for reading. So thank you for being patient with me, for listening to me, reading all of this. So I would like to continue now. I mean, this was a large picture of what took place in Chiapas during these years. But in order to get deeper into the knowledge and the content and the ideology of these indigenous groups in Chiapas,